Hi, welcome to Fiction Fingers Fairy Channel. Please subscribe to this channel for more interesting stories, and don't forget to like and share this video. Thank you. As the days passed, Suzy found her feelings for Brian growing deeper with each passing moment. I need to put an end to these feelings, Suzy resolved firmly, her voice filled with determination as she attempted to quell the burgeoning emotions within her. Yet, despite her best efforts to suppress her feelings, Suzy discovered that her resolve was no match for the intensity of her emotions. Why can't I shake these feelings? Suzy questioned herself, her voice tinged with frustration as she grappled with the overwhelming tide of affection that threatened to engulf her. Desperate for respite from the torment of her feeling, Suzy sought solace in distractions, throwing herself into her daily routine with renewed vigor. I need to keep busy, Suzy reasoned with herself, her voice laced with determination as she resolved to occupy her mind with tasks and responsibilities. Brian's inner turmoil echoed in the depths of his mind as he grappled with his feelings for Suzy. I must remain loyal to Rachel, Brian reminded himself sternly, his voice filled with resolve as he struggled to suppress the burgeoning emotions within him. I can't let these feelings jeopardize my relationship with Rachel, Brian muttered to himself, his voice tinged with a hint of guilt as he wrestled with the conflict raging within his heart. Desperate to distance himself from Suzy, Brian threw himself into his work, immersing himself in a flurry of tasks and responsibilities. I need to keep busy to keep my mind off Suzy, Brian reasoned with himself, his voice betraying the inner turmoil he battled against. Despite his efforts to maintain a professional distance, Brian found that thoughts of Suzy continued to intrude upon his thoughts, a constant reminder of the forbidden desires that threatened to consume him. I can't afford to entertain these feelings, Brian muttered to himself, his voice heavy with the weight of his unspoken longing. Meanwhile, Suzy reveled in the newfound freedom that Brian's absence afforded her, oblivious to the turmoil brewing within his heart. I'm glad Brian's been so busy lately, Suzy mused to herself, her voice tinged with contentment as she busied herself with household chores. Unaware of Brian's inner struggle, Suzy found solace in the routine of her daily life, her heart light and free from the burden of forbidden love. I'm grateful for the time alone, Suzy whispered to herself, her voice filled with a sense of peace as she embraced the tranquility of her solitude. As weeks turned into months, Brian and Suzy continued to navigate the complexities of their emotions in silence, their inner turmoil hidden behind carefully constructed facades. I must remain faithful to Rachel, Brian reiterated to himself, his voice filled with determination as he resolved to honor his commitment to his partner. Similarly, Suzy vowed to cherish the bond she shared with Rachel and Willy, oblivious to the storm of emotions brewing within Brian's heart. I must focus on my duties and responsibilities, Suzy reminded herself, her voice tinged with determination as she resolved to stay true to her role as a caretaker and companion. During the weekends, Suzy no longer accompanied Brian and Willy on outings. Sometimes she would give excuses about wanting to rest at home, while other times she would go out with her friends. Brian felt relieved when Suzy didn't join them, although he only talked to himself about it. I'm glad Suzy's taking some time for herself, Brian muttered to himself, his voice tinged with a hint of relief as he acknowledged the change in Suzy's behavior. As Suzy withdrew from their weekend activities, Brian found himself enjoying the newfound freedom and flexibility. It's nice to have some time to bond with Willy without Suzy around, Brian remarked silently to himself, his voice betraying a sense of contentment at the opportunity to spend quality time with his son. Brian found himself reaching out to Rachel more frequently, his longing for her palpable in every conversation. I miss you so much, Rachel, Brian confessed over the phone, his voice filled with genuine affection as he expressed his yearning for her presence. Rachel couldn't help but notice the change in Brian's behavior, her curiosity piqued by his sudden surge of attention. Is everything all right, Brian? Rachel inquired tentatively, her voice laced with concern as she sensed a shift in their dynamic. Brushing off Rachel's concerns with excuses of longing and anticipation for her return, Brian attempted to mask the true nature of his feelings. I can't wait for you to come back, Rachel, Brian reiterated, his voice tinged with excitement at the thought of their reunion. Despite his efforts to maintain a facade of normalcy, Brian's increased communication with Rachel only served to heighten her suspicions. Something feels off, Rachel mused to herself, her voice tinged with uncertainty as she contemplated the implications of Brian's behavior. Meanwhile, Brian's eagerness for Rachel's return grew with each passing day, his heart yearning for the comfort and familiarity of her presence. I can't wait to see you again, Rachel, Brian whispered softly to himself, his voice filled with longing as he counted down the days until her homecoming. As the long-awaited day of Rachel's return arrived, Brian and Willy eagerly made their way to the airport to greet her. "I can't wait to see Mommy again, Willy," Brian exclaimed with a smile, his voice filled with anticipation as they embarked on their journey. Meanwhile, Suzy chose to stay behind, citing a desire to prepare a special home-cooked meal for Rachel's homecoming. "I want everything to be perfect for Rachel's return," Suzy explained to Brian, her voice tinged with determination as she busied herself in the kitchen. Despite Suzy's absence, Brian appreciated her thoughtful gesture and agreed to her plan. "That sounds like a wonderful idea, Suzy," Brian responded warmly, his voice filled with gratitude as he acknowledged her efforts to make Rachel's return memorable. As Brian and Willy waited anxiously at the airport, Brian couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement tinged with nervousness. "I hope Rachel's trip went well," Brian muttered to himself, his voice betraying a hint of apprehension as he awaited her arrival. Finally, the moment they had been waiting for arrived as Rachel's plane touched down at the airport. "There she is, Willy! Mommy's back!" Brian exclaimed joyfully, his voice filled with relief as he caught sight of Rachel making her way through the terminal. As Rachel approached, Brian enveloped her in a warm embrace, his heart overflowing with love and happiness at her safe return. "Welcome back, Rachel," Brian whispered softly, his voice filled with emotion as he held her close. Overwhelmed with emotion, Rachel returned Brian's embrace, grateful to be reunited with her family once again. "I missed you both so much," Rachel murmured tearfully, her voice filled with love and gratitude as she held onto Brian and Willy tightly. Arriving back at the house, Rachel eagerly anticipated the delicious meal Suzy had prepared for her homecoming. "I can't wait to taste Suzy's cooking," Rachel remarked excitedly, his voice filled with anticipation as they stepped through the door. During lunch, Rachel expressed her heartfelt gratitude to Suzy for preparing such a delicious meal. "Thank you so much, Suzy. This meal is amazing," Rachel exclaimed with a smile, her voice filled with genuine appreciation as she savored the flavors of the home-cooked dishes. Suzy smiled warmly in response to Rachel's gratitude, her heart swelling with pride at being able to contribute to Rachel's homecoming. "It's my pleasure, Rachel. I'm glad you enjoyed it," Suzy replied humbly, her voice tinged with happiness as she basked in Rachel's appreciation. Rachel then turned to Suzy with a grateful expression, acknowledging her invaluable role in taking care of their family during her absence. "I want to thank you, Suzy, for everything you've done for us while I was away. You've been such a blessing to our family," Rachel expressed sincerely, her voice filled with warmth and gratitude. Suzy's eyes glistened with emotion at Rachel's heartfelt words, touched by the recognition of her efforts. "It's been my pleasure to help out, Rachel. Your family means a lot to me," Suzy responded earnestly, her voice filled with sincerity as she returned Rachel's grateful gaze. As Suzy observed Rachel's trust and sincerity towards her, she couldn't help but feel a growing sense of guilt for harboring feelings towards Rachel's husband, Brian. "Rachel trusts me so much, and here I am, hiding this secret," Suzy muttered to herself, her voice filled with self-reproach as she grappled with the weight of her emotions. Despite her best efforts to push aside her feelings, Suzy found herself overwhelmed by a sense of remorse and regret. "I never meant for this to happen," Suzy whispered quietly to herself, her voice tinged with sorrow as she reflected on the situation. As Suzy wrestled with her conflicting emotions, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling of guilt gnawing at her conscience. "I'm betraying Rachel's trust," Suzy admitted to herself, her voice laced with anguish as she confronted the harsh reality of her predicament. After days of battling with her inner turmoil, Suzy finally mustered the courage to approach Rachel and Brian. "I need to talk to you both," she began hesitantly, her voice betraying a sense of seriousness. Rachel's brows furrowed in concern as she observed Suzy's demeanor. "You sound serious. Is anything wrong?" she asked, her voice filled with worry and compassion. Brian attempted to conceal his own unease, his heart pounding with anticipation as he awaited Suzy's response. "Yes, Suzy, is there anything we can help with?" he inquired, his voice masking the turmoil of emotions he felt towards Suzy. "I've ruined everything," Suzy whispered to herself, her voice heavy with guilt. "I never meant for this to happen," Suzy continued, her words tinged with regret as she reflected on the pain she had caused Rachel. "I've betrayed her trust," Suzy admitted, her heart sinking with remorse as she acknowledged the magnitude of her actions. "How could I let myself develop these feelings?" Suzy questioned, her voice filled with self-reproach as she berated herself for her inability to control her emotions. "Suzy! Suzy!" Rachel called out, shaking Suzy from her reverie. Startled, Suzy snapped back to reality, her thoughts momentarily scattered. "What's wrong, Suzy? Is everything okay?" Rachel inquired, her concern evident in her voice as she reached out to Suzy. Suzy took a deep breath, trying to compose herself before responding. I need to talk to you about something, she began, her voice trembling. To be continued,